You know what's funny about silence? Real silence, I mean. The kind you get up in the mountains when the wind dies and even the birds shut up. It's not peaceful. Not really. It's the kind of silence that makes the hair on your arm stand straight up because something inside you knows. Something is wrong. That was the kind of silence that fell over that valley the morning everything went sideways. And I wasn't even there for the worst of it. I was 3 ridges away, behind a spotter scope, watching it happen through a piece of glass that probably saved my life. But she was there, right in the middle of it. And by the time the sun finished climbing over those rocks, 11 men were dead, and one of them was a colonel they'd been chasing for 2 years. Her name was Reina Vasquez, and this is what really happened up on that mountain. Let me back up. I was a spotter, that's it. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend I was some hero. My job was to lie on my belly and read the wind for someone smarter than me. I was 24 years old when I met her. She was 29. Already had more confirmed kills than most guys with double her years in. The first time I saw her, she was eating a granola bar in the back of a transport truck. Boots off, socks rolled down, reading a paperback book like the rest of us weren't bouncing around in the dust trying not to throw up. She didn't look up. "You're the new spotter," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "Don't call me ma'am, I work for a living." I laughed she didn't. That was Reina, dry as bone, quiet. The kind of person who could go 6 hours without saying a word and then say one sentence that made you think about it for a week. We were deployed to a region I'm not allowed to name. Doesn't matter. Mountains, cold mornings, hot afternoons. The kind of place where the wind changes direction 4 times in an hour, and if you don't pay attention, you'll miss a shot at 300 meters that you could have made in your sleep back at the range. Our target was a man called Karim Dashev. Used to be a colonel in a real army. Then he wasn't. Then he was running guns and people across a border that didn't really exist anymore. Killed a lot of villagers. Killed a lot of soldiers. Burned a school, supposedly. I don't know if that one's true. People say a lot of things. What I do know is that we'd been tracking him for 14 months, by the time Reina got assigned to the team. 14 months. You don't know what that does to people. You start to lose the shape of him. He becomes a story, a ghost. Guys in the unit started joking that he didn't exist, that we were chasing a rumor. Then we got the intel. A village informant, a kid maybe 16, walked 5 miles in the snow to tell us Dashev was meeting with 3 other commanders in a stone house up in a place called the Black Notch. That's not the real name. I'm calling it that. The real name is something you wouldn't be able to pronounce anyway. The Black Notch sits between 2 ridges, steep walls on both sides, one road in, one road out. If you wanted to ambush someone, it'd be the worst place in the world to try it. If you wanted to make sure nobody got away, it'd be perfect. We had 36 hours to get into position. I remember the briefing. We were in a tent that smelled like diesel and old coffee. Captain Mara had a map spread out on a folding table, and he was pointing at it with a pen that he'd been chewing on. "Vasquez, you're high," he said. "Top of the East Ridge. You'll have line of sight on the front of the building and most of the courtyard. Logan, you're spotting. Get her there before first light." He looked at her like he was waiting for her to nod. She didn't nod. She just looked at the map. "What's the elevation?" she asked. "About 1,400 meters to the courtyard." "From the ridge?" "From your position to the target, yeah." She tilted her head. "That's a long shot in that altitude. The air's thinner. I'll have to recalculate." "You'll have time. And the wind comes off that pass at angles. There's a saddle right there." She pointed at a spot on the map. "It funnels." Mara raised his eyebrows. "You've been there?" "No, but I can read a map." He smiled a little. It was the first time I'd seen him smile in weeks. "All right," he said. "She's right, wind's gonna be a mess. Plan for it." The walk-in was the worst part. We left at 1 in the morning. No headlamps, no noise, just two of us plus a small support team of 4 guys who'd peel off at different points to set up overwatch positions on the lower slopes. The plan was that Raina and I would be the highest, the farthest, the most invisible. The cold was something I'll never forget. It got into your boots first, then your fingers, then it got under your jacket and into your spine, and after about 2 hours of climbing, you stopped feeling your face. We had to whisper to each other to make sure the other one was still alive. "You good?" I'd ask. "Oh." That was it. That was the conversation. She moved like she was made of smoke. I'm not exaggerating. I was breathing hard, slipping on rocks, dropping things. She was just gliding up that slope like the mountain knew her. I asked her once how she did it. She said her grandfather used to take her hunting in mountains like this when she was little. "What were you hunting?" I asked. "Anything that ran." She didn't smile when she said it. We got to the position about an hour before dawn. It was a small cut in the rock, almost like a notch in a brick wall. You couldn't see it from below. You couldn't see it from the side. The only way to know it was there was to be standing on top of it, and even then, you'd have to look twice. Raina had picked it out from a satellite image 2 days before. She set up her rifle slow. That was something I learned watching her. She didn't rush, ever. She'd unfold the bipod, then pause, check the legs, pause, lay the rifle down, pause, open the bolt, pause. It was almost like a prayer. I asked her about it once, back at base. She said, "When you rush, you forget things. When you forget things, you die. When you die, somebody else dies." That was all. The sun came up at 6:14. I remember the exact time because I was checking my watch about every 30 seconds. The light hit the top of the western ridge first, turning it pink, then orange, then this gold color that made the whole valley look like a painting. That's when we saw them. 3 vehicles, old Russian SUVs, mud all over them. They came up the road slow, headlights off, and pulled into the courtyard of the stone house. 6 men got out. Then 2 more from the second vehicle, then 4 from the third. 12 men. Raina was already counting. I could hear her breathing change, slow, deep, then slower. "Dashev," she whispered. I had the spotting scope on the lead vehicle. A tall man with a gray beard got out of the front passenger seat. He was wearing a dark coat. He turned to say something to the man behind him, and I saw his face clearly for maybe 2 seconds. "That's him." "You sure?" "Yeah, that's him." She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, "We wait." That's the part nobody tells you about being a sniper, the waiting. We waited 2 hours. 2 hours of watching men carry crates in and out of that house. 2 hours of trying not to move, not to shiver, not to cough. My knees went numb. My hips started to ache. The sun came up properly, and the temperature in our little notch went from freezing to almost warm, and then it kept climbing, and by 10 in the morning I was sweating into my collar even though my feet were still cold. Raina didn't move. I mean she did, she breathed. Her finger rested near the trigger, her eyes scanned, but her body was stone. I've never seen anything like it before or since. She was waiting for the right moment. The plan was simple. When the 4 high-value targets were all visible in the courtyard at the same time, the call would come over the radio, and the strike teams down below would move in. Raina's job was to take out anyone who tried to run for the vehicles. She was the lid on the box. But the box was supposed to open from below. It didn't. At 10:40 in the morning, the radio crackled. It was Mara. His voice was tight. "Echo team is compromised. Repeat, Echo team is compromised." I felt my stomach drop. Echo was the lower strike unit. 8 guys. They'd been creeping up the road for the last hour, hidden in a dry creek bed. If they were compromised, that meant somebody had spotted them, which meant they've got eyes on the south slope. Reyna whispered. She was already adjusting her position. The men in the courtyard started moving fast. Dashev grabbed someone by the arm and pointed up the hill. 2 of the guards ran to the vehicles. Others started pulling rifles out of the crates they'd just been unloading. Logan, Reyna said, how many? 12, now 13. Somebody came out of the house. Range. 1340 to the courtyard. Wind is left to right, maybe 8. Copy. She took the first shot at 1042. I'll remember the sound of it for the rest of my life. It wasn't loud, exactly. Up that high, in that thin air with the muzzle brake she had on that rifle, it sounded almost like a wet snap, like a branch breaking under deep snow. The first man went down before the others even knew where the shot came from. That's the thing about high ground. When you fire from way up, the sound takes a second to reach the target. They don't know which direction it came from. They just see their friend fall and then they panic. The second man fell a heartbeat later. By the third shot, they figured out the angle and they all started running for cover. But Reyna had already moved her scope. I want to stop here and tell you something. People think snipers shoot fast. They don't. Reyna fired 4 shots in the first 2 minutes. 4, that's it. She wasn't spraying. She wasn't trying to be a movie hero. Each one of those shots was placed, picked. She'd see a man duck behind a vehicle and she'd wait. She'd watch his shadow. She'd watch the dust. She'd predict where his head would come up next. And then she'd fire. And he'd be gone. By the 5th shot, the men in the courtyard had figured out we were on the east ridge. They started firing wildly in our direction, but they didn't have the range, and they didn't have the angle. Their bullets were hitting rock face about 200 meters below us. They can't reach us, I told her. Not yet, she said. That was when the situation changed. A second vehicle came up the road. Then a third. Then a fourth. These weren't Dashevs. These were a different group. I saw the markings on the side of one of the trucks and my mouth went dry. Reyna. I see them. I know. There was a militia group in that region. They worked with Dashev sometimes. Sometimes they fought him. It depended on the week. But that morning they showed up in force. 40 men, maybe 50, came pouring out of those trucks. And they had heavier weapons, belt-fed machine guns, RPGs. One of them had a long rifle with a scope on it and he was scanning the ridges. Looking for us. The radio crackled again. Vasquez, fall back, repeat, fall back. We're sending extraction to the secondary point. Reyna didn't answer. She just kept her eye on the scope. I grabbed her shoulder. Reyna, we have to move. She said one word. No. And that was the moment I realized I was sitting next to a woman who was about to do something I would tell my kids about someday, when they were old enough to understand what kind of people walk among us. Reyna. Reyna, look at me. She didn't. She was watching the man with the long rifle. He was about a third of the way up the western ridge now, climbing fast, with 2 spotters of his own. They were going to set up directly across from us. Once they did, it was a duel. And duels at 1300 meters favor whoever fires first. I have to call this in, I said. Do it. I keyed the radio. Command, this is Echo 6. We have hostile sniper team moving up West Ridge. Repeat, hostile sniper team West Ridge. The voice that came back was Mara's, but it wasn't the same Mara from the briefing tent. He sounded tired in a way I'd never heard before. Echo 6, we are taking heavy fire on the south slope. We cannot reach you. Repeat, we cannot reach you. Get off that ridge. I looked at Reyna. She wasn't looking at me. She was making tiny adjustments to her scope. Click, click, click. Reyna, did you hear him? I heard him. Then let's go. In a minute. She took her 5th shot. The man with the long rifle had stopped to set up his bipod on a rock outcropping. He was kneeling, exposed for about 3 seconds. 3 seconds was enough. I watched through the spotter scope as he dropped, just folded over sideways like somebody had cut the strings holding him up. His spotters scrambled for cover. One of them got behind a boulder. The other one didn't make it. Raina's 6th shot found him too. Then she did something I didn't expect. She stood up. Not all the way. She kind of crouched, kept her head low, but she lifted her body off the rock and started repositioning her rifle to face north, not east. "What are you doing?" "They're going to flank us," she said. "Who?" "The ones in the trucks." She pointed. I followed her finger. About a dozen of the militia guys had broken off from the main group and were heading up the road that wound around behind our ridge. They were going to come up behind us, slowly, carefully, but they'd get there. Maybe in 45 minutes, maybe less. I felt the panic try to crawl up my throat. I'd been in firefights before. I'd been shot at. I'd been close to bad situations. But this was the first time I genuinely believed I might not see the end of a day. Raina saw my face. She put her hand on my arm. She had small hands. I don't know why I remember that. Small, calloused hands. There was a thin scar across her knuckle that she got from a fence when she was a kid, she told me once. Climbing into somewhere she wasn't supposed to be. "Logan," she said, "look at me." I looked at her. "We have the high ground. We have the angles. They have to come up to us, and the only way up is that ridge trail. I can put a round through any man on that trail at 600 meters, 800 meters, 1,000 meters. They will not reach us. Do you understand?" "Yes." "Say it again." "Yes, I understand." "Okay, then I need you to do your job. Read the wind. Watch the courtyard. Tell me if Dashev moves. We are not leaving until that man is dead." I swallowed. My mouth was dry as sand. Okay. The next 40 minutes were the longest of my life. The men coming up the back trail moved smart. They didn't bunch up. They spread out 10 meters between each man, taking turns moving while the others covered. Old infantry, professional. Raina picked them off one at a time. She didn't try to be fancy. She didn't try to do trick shots. She just waited until one of them had to step out from behind cover for 2 seconds, and she put a round through him, and then she'd shift her aim and wait for the next one. The crack of her rifle echoed off the rocks like applause. The first man fell at 800 meters. The second at 750. The third tried to crawl. He almost made it back to cover. Almost. The fourth man started screaming at the others. I couldn't hear what he was saying. The wind was wrong, but you could tell from his body language that he was trying to rally them, get them to push. They were a dozen men with rifles and grenades, and we were 2 people in a rock notch with 1 bolt-action rifle. He kept screaming. Then he stopped screaming. Raina chambered the next round. By the time the 8th man fell, the rest of them started running back down the trail. I almost laughed. I don't know why. It wasn't funny. 8 men were dead. But there was something about watching grown men, hardened killers, just turn and sprint downhill because of one woman with a rifle they couldn't even see. Raina didn't laugh. She didn't even smile. She was watching the courtyard again. The original militia force was thinning. They'd lost guys to our other teams down on the south slope, even with Echo Team compromised. The radio chatter was getting clearer. Mara's voice came back, less tired now. Echo 6, what is your status? Echo 6 is still on the ridge. We have multiple confirmed kills on the back trail. They've broken off. A pause. You stayed. Yes. You stayed. He said it again, like he couldn't believe it. We have Dashev in sight, I said. Stand by. Raina had her scope on the stone house. The big door was opening. Two of Dashev's bodyguards stepped out first, looking around, then a third, then Dashev himself with another man holding his arm. They were trying to make a run for the lead vehicle. Raina's breathing slowed. I watched her finger. It didn't move yet. Wait, she whispered to herself. Wait. The wind shifted. I felt it on the back of my neck, a small change, from the saddle, just like she'd predicted in the briefing tent 2 days ago. Wind 2:06, I said. Copy. She adjusted. Dashev stepped into the open. For a half-second he stood completely still, looking up at the western ridge, where his sniper had been. Maybe he was wondering where his man went. Maybe he was wondering if it was over. It was over. She fired. The shot hit him just below the collarbone. I saw it through the scope. There's no nice way to say what happens to a man when a round like that hits him from that range. He didn't fly back. He didn't spin. He just kind of collapsed, like a folding chair when you kick the legs out. His bodyguards froze for a second. Just a second. But that was enough time for Raina to put a second round through the man closest to Dashev's body, and a third through the one trying to drag him toward the vehicle. 3 shots. 3 down. The other men in the courtyard scattered, but the fight had gone out of them. Their leader was face down in the dirt. The militia reinforcements were dead or retreating. Our South Slope team was finally pushing up, and you could hear the crack of their rifles drifting up the valley. It was almost over. But not quite. Because here's the thing about fights like that. There's always one more. There's always somebody you didn't account for, somebody hiding, somebody waiting. For us, it was a guy named Vahid Demir. I didn't know his name then. I learned it later, after intel got pulled together and we went through the after-action reports. At the time, all I knew was that there was a man crawling up our ridge from a direction we hadn't expected, and he was almost on top of us before I saw him. He came up from the east side of our ridge. There wasn't supposed to be a trail there. The maps showed it as a sheer cliff face. It wasn't. There was a goat path, narrow, almost vertical. Locals knew about it, we didn't. I caught movement in the corner of my eye and turned, and there he was, maybe 40 meters from us, hauling himself up over the lip of a rock. AK in one hand, a pistol on his hip, face streaked with dirt and sweat. He saw me at the same moment I saw him. I want to be honest about something. I froze. For maybe a full second I just froze. My rifle was right next to me. I could have grabbed it. I was trained to grab it. I'd done the drills 1,000 times. But in that second I looked at his face and he looked at mine and neither of us moved. Then he raised the AK. And then Raina shot him in the chest. She'd done it without even fully turning around. Just rolled onto her side, brought the rifle up, fired 1 round from the hip, and I mean from the hip, not aimed, not braced, just instinct, and he went over the side of the cliff. I heard him hit the rocks below. It took a long time. She lowered the rifle slowly. She looked at me. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. I couldn't talk. "Logan." "Yeah." "You froze." "I know. It happens." She didn't say it like she was angry. She didn't say it like she was disappointed. She said it like a doctor telling you that you had a cold. Just a fact. I'm not going to lie. I cried a little right there in that rock notch. Not big crying. Not movie crying. Just water in my eyes that I couldn't control. I was 24 years old, and I just watched a woman save my life by doing something I didn't think was physically possible. She didn't say anything about the tears. She just turned back to her scope and went back to watching the courtyard. The fight ended about 20 minutes later. Most of the militia had broken and run. The ones who stayed died. Our South Slope teams cleared the stone house and confirmed Dashev's kill. They also found a stack of documents in a hidden room that would, over the next several months, lead to the breakup of 3 different smuggling rings. We did it. We actually did it. But we still had to get off that ridge. And the way down was harder than the way up. Raina packed her rifle the same way she'd unpacked it. Slow, deliberate, pause, pause, pause. I watched her hands. There was a small tremor in them. I'd never seen that before. I'd seen her work in awful conditions, in cold and heat and exhaustion, and her hands had always been steady. But there, after it was over, after we knew we were going to live, her hands shook a little. She caught me looking. "Don't tell anyone," she said. "I won't." She nodded. Then she picked up the rifle and slung it over her shoulder. "Let's go home." The walk down was quiet. We didn't talk much. There wasn't anything to say. We passed the body of the man she'd shot from the hip. He was on a ledge about 30 meters below our notch, twisted in a way that made my stomach turn. I tried not to look at his face. She did. She looked at him for a long time. "You all right?" I asked. "He had a wife," she said. "How do you know?" "Ring." I hadn't noticed. She looked at him a little longer, then turned and kept walking. That was the only thing she said about it, ever. When we got back to the base camp, there was almost a party, guys clapping each other on the back. Mara grabbed me in a hug that lifted my feet off the ground. Someone produced a bottle of something brown and started passing it around. Raina walked through all of it without saying a word. She went straight to her tent. She didn't come out for the rest of the night. I sat on a crate outside our briefing tent later, drinking the brown stuff out of a tin cup. The sun was going down. The air was getting cold again. The kind of cold that promises a hard freeze before morning. Mara came over and sat next to me. "That was something," he said. "Yeah." 11 confirmed, from one shooter. "Yeah." He took the cup from me and had a sip, made a face, handed it back. "You all right, son?" I didn't know what to say. "I froze, sir." He nodded slowly. "First time?" "Yeah." "Won't be the last." He stood up and put a hand on my shoulder. "Don't carry it. You're alive. She's alive. That's what matters." He walked away. I sat there for a long time, watching the sky turn purple and thinking about what Raina had said. He had a wife. I thought about that for years afterward. I still do sometimes. Most of those men, the ones we killed that day, were bad. They'd done bad things, Dashev especially. He deserved what he got. The world was a better place without him. But that man on the goat path, I didn't know him. I didn't know what he'd done. I didn't know if he was a true believer or just a guy who needed money. I didn't know if he had kids. I didn't know if he was a brother, a son, a husband. He had a wife. That's all she said. That's all I had. I went to find her after dark. Her tent was at the end of the row, near the perimeter. I could see the soft glow of a flashlight inside. I scratched on the canvas, which is how you knock on a tent when you don't want to be loud. "It's Logan." "Come in." I unzipped the flap and stepped inside. She was sitting on her cot, cleaning her rifle. The pieces were laid out on a green cloth in front of her. Bolt, action, barrel, each piece looked like it had been wiped down twice already. She was wiping them again. "Hey," I said. "Hey." I sat down on the cot across from her. "How are you?" She kept wiping the bolt. "I'm here." "Yeah." A long silence. Then she said, "I keep seeing his face." "Dashev." "No, the one on the goat path."